I personally believed that like I would be the same exact person on the other side. I would have my baby, everything would be exactly the same. But like studying matrescence shows us that so much changes for a mom, whether it's like biological, emotional, relational, even like political and economical, so many different areas of your life. So it's not just like one day you're there.
This is Raising Mama, a hilariously honest podcast dedicated to unveiling the hidden realities of motherhood.
Our goal is to arm you with the information and tools you need to be your most confident and empowered self.
This podcast is packed with unfiltered testimonies, diverse perspectives, and expert opinions, along with a good dose of laughter and tears.
Leading you on this journey is my best friend, Megan Stander, who is a CEO, passionate maternal health advocate, and mom of 2 daughters.
Alongside me is my best friend, Chelsea Ledson, who is a mother, wife, and registered nurse with her master's specializing in women's health. Let's try to raise the next generation
By raising up mamas.
and maybe raising a little hell.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, mamas.
Welcome back to Raising Mama.
On today's episode, we will be unpacking the science and sociology behind why new motherhood in the U.S. is so difficult. We're talking to Kelly Conroy, who is a matrescence educator formerly trained in biology, anthropology, birth story medicine, and somatic approaches to healing trauma. Using a combination of science, compassion, and personal experience as a mom of 2, she helps women navigate the complexities of motherhood so they feel empowered in their lives, their parenting, and in the world. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to
Hello.
be here.
We're happy to have you. We're super excited, and I can't wait to pick your brain about all things evolution and society, and because motherhood is really, really difficult.
Yes. Yeah.
Definitely. And it was on this show I actually learned the meaning of matrescence, more or less know that there's such a thing as a matrescence educator. From my point of view, matrescence, it just sort of means the process of becoming a mother. Did I get that right, Kelly?
Yeah, matrescence is broadly defined as the process of becoming a mother. And I think it's a really important term because, there's kind of this belief or this idea that like if you have a baby, you just magically like someone hands you your baby and you just become a mom and you just know what you're doing. And I personally believed that like I would be the same exact person on the other side. I would have my baby, everything would be exactly the same. I kind of almost imagined my baby as being like like a little accessory, right? Like the Paris Hilton like dog in the purse, right? But like studying matrescence shows us that so much changes for a mom, right? Whether it's like biological, emotional, relational, even like political and economical, like so many different areas of your life change and shift when you become a mom. And it is kind of an ongoing process. So it's not just like one day you're there, right? It's this continuous sort of learning and evolving.
Yeah, and I know for sure, like in your work, it's like super anthropological. It comes from this like whole evolutionary point of view. So I was so curious, like from that point of view, like how would you say evolution has affected like the process of birth, like what we experience today?
Yeah, it's there's this like narrative that, the a woman's body is like built for having babies, right? And that leads to all kinds of like us feeling bad about ourselves when it doesn't go super smoothly. But when you look into human evolution, what you learn is that like childbirth and pregnancy, like reproducing and having kids was not the number one thing that our bodies evolved for. So looking all the way back through the evolutionary history of humans, really what our bodies evolved for was to be bipedal. So that means like walking upright on 2 feet, right? Instead of quadrupedal, like feet and hands, right? All fours. And so as humans evolved to stand upright on 2 feet, what had to happen is our pelvis had to get really small. And a small pelvis does not make it easy to have do childbirth, to have a baby. And so it's kind of confusing because a lot of people will learn that information and they're like, well, why? Like, isn't reproducing an important thing? Like, why did we evolve to have a small pelvis? And the answer to that is being bipedal was a larger evolutionary advantage than
Hmm.
having an easy childbirth. right? Like essentially being bipedal saved us energy. Humans could walk farther to find food, walk farther to find shelter and, mates and things like that. So it helped us survive. And then as a sort of like a secondary benefit, sometimes Homo sapiens had successful childbirth. So it like
Hmm.
worked well enough, basically. Like having the small pelvis worked well enough for
Right.
humans to continue on.
Yeah, so I was talking to my mom about this the other night, and I was trying to explain to her. So, isn't there like is that why babies are so helpless when they're born? Because, like, I was
Yes.
trying to think of other animals. We were like going through animals, like, what other animals are as helpless as human babies when they're born? And, like,
Yes.
first of all, like, are there any other animals or are we like alone in this strange phenomenon? Like, we had a debate
Yeah.
about whether how
This is what
about
Megan and her mom
kittens.
talk
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. But, like, I know, like, it's like I mean, we have huge heads, like, especially
Yes.
babies,
Yeah.
so that's an
Yeah.
issue and probably related to everything, but yeah, tell
Totally.
us
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all related to like the evolutionary anatomy and physiology of humans, basically. So, yes, we have huge heads. Homo sapiens as a species, we have gigantic skulls because we have huge brains, right? That's one of the things that sets humans apart is we're so smart. We have huge brains. And that means that, our heads have to be big. So now for childbirth, we're balancing this like small pelvis, which helped Homo sapiens survive in all these amazing ways, and these huge brains, which also helped Homo sapiens survive
Mm.
in all of these amazing ways, right? But when they fit, they don't fit together, right? Like, so yes, humans have to be born essentially before they're ready. So even like a full term human baby is, sort
They're
of
not fully
considered,
cooked,
right?
yeah.
They're not fully cooked, right?
They're
And so
like
that's why
medium rare.
totally, yes. Yeah. So that's why we have like the fourth trimester, right? When babies just want to
Right.
be snuggled up. They just want to be wrapped up and cocooned and sleeping all the time because they're still essentially developing. But if they stayed, in the womb until they were quote unquote like ready to be born, until they were fully developed, then they wouldn't actually fit out of our pelvis. So it's like this kind of like toss up balancing act of like when can they come out versus when they're actually ready to come out.
It feels like the babies are literally being born at like a female's maximum capacity to handle
Yes.
it. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like everything's like as extreme as possible. And so it would make a lot of sense for like a woman to have such a huge reaction to childbirth because in fact it's the most extreme thing amongst all the animals even,
Yes.
It's like
Yeah.
we won that card.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, if you compare like I'm such a science nerd, right? That's why my work comes with this like heavy scientific lens. But if you compare like you can Google it and just look up an image of like the comparative size of the pelvic outlet of all of the other great apes, right? So our like closest living ancestors like gorillas, orangutans, chimpanzees, and then the relative size of their infant's head at childbirth, there is so much space in all of the other great apes. Like there's so much like I hate to say wiggle room, but like there's so much extra space between like the size of the pelvic outlet and the size of the infant's head. But if you look at a human, comparatively, it's like the infant's head just barely and maybe doesn't even fit out the pelvic outlet. And so that's why in childbirth you have your pelvis, the two halves of your pelvis can separate. It can actually like tear apart a joint in order to make more space. It's awful. It's like to make more space for the head to come out, and that's also why baby heads like sometimes they come out kind of like shaped like a cone, right? So our
Yeah.
skulls are actually made up of like different plates, different bony plates. It's not just one big bone. It's like all these sort of disconnected plates, and that's so that they can squeeze and shift to fit out of the pelvic outlet, and then later
Ooh.
on the baby's head sort of like solidifies and forms, but like it's
Mhm.
gnarly. Like human childbirth is gnarly. It's the most complex, difficult, painful childbirth of the great apes for sure.
I'm wondering if, like, other apes also get round ligament pain, you know?
Yeah.
Or, like
Yeah.
because I think that's part of it, right? It's like, if we have to get our pelvises wide open, our ligaments are gonna suffer,
Yeah, the
and
ligaments,
we're
right? The
gonna suffer.
muscles. Yeah, muscles stretch apart. Yeah, it's interesting to be in this line of work, right? Because so many moms on the other side of childbirth will have this belief that like they weren't good enough or they weren't strong enough or they just didn't try hard enough or something like that because we've been sold this idea that childbirth is natural and easy and like it's what our bodies are made for, right? And yes, childbirth is natural, right? Reproduction is natural. But natural just means that it happens in nature, right? A lot of things happen in nature. Hurricanes happen in nature, you know what I mean? Like earthquakes happen in nature, but that doesn't make it
Mhm.
easy, it doesn't make it pleasant. Natural doesn't mean easy. And I think that's an important thing to talk about when it comes to especially childbirth, but even things like fertility complications, things like that. Like just because you have a uterus doesn't mean it's easy to become a mom and to have a baby.
Yeah, that's kind of heavy. I had to take a second there to really process that, and I'm trying to think of, like, the other factors that become difficult because of this. I mean, there's a lot of them. So, like, obviously, pregnancy is gonna be more difficult, and recovery is gonna be more difficult.
Yeah, like what do you
Yeah.
think women need to do to kind of combat this? Like what do you is there anything that they can help prepare for it, or like what has our bodies evolved to do anything special so that we can like make the most out of being pregnant and breastfeeding and just this traumatic experience?
Yeah. Yeah, it is it can be kind of a traumatic experience. Um yeah, I mean, in the US we have this like very toxic just like bounce back culture, right? This very toxic belief that like, oh, you just pop a baby out and you get right back to it, right? But understanding what your body actually goes through to be pregnant and to give birth and to then recover postpartum, and then if you're breastfeeding, it's very taxing. Breastfeeding requires something like 4,000 calories a day. It's even more than being pregnant, the energy that
Hmm.
you burn that your body needs to produce breast milk. And rest, right? Like recovering is takes a long time. Recovery, we have this like 6-week appointment right after childbirth, and we think, okay, I should be all done at 6 weeks, right? I should be back to normal, going to spin class, going for jogs, whatever it is. But 6 weeks is not like the marker for when you're done recovering. It really takes about a
Mm.
full year to recover from childbirth. So the best thing, it's kind of like rewriting your understanding of what you actually go through when you have a baby and then setting yourself up to be supported in any way that you can, right? Even if you have like a 5-year-old, right? You're still in matrescence, like you're still learning how to be a mom. Your brain is still working just literally overtime trying to figure out how to keep up and learn how to parent. And all of these things like recovering from childbirth, learning how to be a parent, they all require energy, right? So just like the basic unit of energy that our body uses is calories, right? So eat like all the food, eat all of the good nutritious food and rest as much as you can. And it's almost like painful to say like those are the two things, right? Like sleep and eat, because when you have young kids, those are the two hardest things to do, right? Like there's no easy way to get both of those things for yourself. And that's why it really comes down to building in as much support as you can to make sure that you have the space to do those things for yourself.
That's just so interesting because that's definitely something that's been like echoed on this podcast like a billion times. Like, find your village, find your people. And I also think it's interesting too that you're talking about how, like, newborns really aren't fully cooked. And we've talked about like sleep training on the last episode. And basically, it's like that whole thing was just saying the same thing. It's like newborns aren't there yet. Like they just, you shouldn't be sleep training right out of birth. You shouldn't be doing all these things. It's just we do take for granted as a society just like how dramatic it is to the woman's body, and that like a year of postpartum should be way more normalized than it is. And the other fascinating subject you talk about is how your actual brain chemistry changes as a mom. I would love to hear more about that because I think we all experience it, but I don't know like the science behind it.
Yeah, I wanna know too, 'cause I have glitchy brain chemistry.
Yes.
Somewhere, like, some, like, ingredient, like, wasn't they, like, forgot it. They were tired.
Yeah, it's the brain stuff is so fascinating. There's a lot of really, really interesting emerging research on it. And part of it is it's kind of two parts, right? Part of it is, yes, neuroscience, right? Which is mostly hormonally driven. And I'm so happy to talk about that because it's so interesting. And the other piece of it is just like simply our brains are overloaded, right?
Hmm.
People use the term like mom brain to be kind of like pejorative, right? Almost to like discredit women for our brains not working properly when we, have babies. But really it's just like women are so overloaded, moms in particular are so overloaded with way too much stuff on our brains. And our brains just aren't designed to carry the mental load that we're carrying, right? Like the expectations are just too high and like the sleep and the nutrition are not high enough to keep up, right? Um, so part of that is just like there's not enough capacity to do what we're asking our brains to do. But the other piece is, yes, when you become a parent and brain chemistry changes for all caregivers. So there are like certain hormonal drivers that hit harder when you've given birth, right? Because when you're pregnant, your estrogen and progesterone are just like skyrocketing. And then right after you give birth, they just absolutely dive like off the cliff. And that then signals other hormones to rise up. So you have like oxytocin and prolactin rising, right after childbirth when you lose all of that estrogen and progesterone. But when you lose all of that estrogen and progesterone, those hormones are also tied to feel good neurotransmitters. So think about like serotonin and dopamine. And so when the estrogen and progesterone drop, the serotonin and the dopamine also drop. And that's why you get those effects like the baby blues, right? So those first 2 weeks
Mm.
after having a baby, when you just kind of are like sad, moody, weepy, things like that, because your body is adjusting to losing all of that feel good, being pumped full of all that feel good stuff. But the oxytocin does something really interesting. It actually drives you to learn how to take care of your baby.
Hmm.
So this whole idea that like you become a mom and you just magically have these instincts, that's a myth, right? There's no such thing as mothering instincts. The truth is that mothering is a learned skill. And so oxytocin is like the chemical, like the bonding chemical, right? The like cuddly emotional bonding chemical. And so you can think of it like, I'll use myself as an example. My daughter, when she was born, had terrible colic. If anybody who has experienced colic, my condolences. It is a nightmare. And
Mm.
so I was trying everything that I could to fix it, right? To find a solution for colic. I had never experienced colic before. I had never been a parent before, so I had no idea what I was doing. But I stumbled upon this ebook about how to fix colic, basically. And it was like offering different burping techniques. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try it. So I like watched for, the cue that she was supposed to give that said she needed to burp. And then I'd like put her into the burping position and it would work, right? She would burp
Hmm.
and she would be kind of like relieved of colic for a little bit. And so that is a situation where it like gave me a spike of oxytocin. I tried something, it worked. I took care of my baby. And so it
Hmm.
wired my brain to be like, great job.
Hmm.
You did it.
Ding, ding, ding.
Right.
Here's
Yeah.
We will be linking to this PDF in
Yeah.
the description.
Yeah.
Unrelated, but
Yeah. Um, yeah. And so it gave my brain the reward of oxytocin. And so it's like trial and error, trial and reward. And so you're getting these boosts of oxytocin every time you're taking care of your baby, because when you're taking care of a child, you're learning. right? You're learning who that child is, you're learning what works for them, you're learning just like mechanically how to do something that you've never done before. And this happens for everybody. This happens for fathers, this happens for nannies, this happens for grandparents. Whoever's taking care of a child is getting these hits of oxytocin in their brain, which is basically just encouraging learning because that's what
Hmm.
parenting is.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I'm it makes me think about how, sometimes the baby in like a partner relationship is like handed off to the mom because they're like, I don't know what I'm doing, or like you've got you've got the touch, and like that stuff has always annoyed me because it's like
Yes, as
the
it should.
only reason I know how to comfort and console the baby is because I've tried a zillion things and like I
Hmm.
figured out what works. And of course you can
Yes.
exchange tips like back and forth, but you know, I guess
Yeah.
it's just and honestly, to tie it in, that does make motherhood harder for women
Yes.
because maybe biologically like we've got like a head start on the oxytocin, and so that initially gives us an advantage with like the drive to take care of them, but then we end up taking on a lot of the responsibility instead of like the partner always catching up. Hashtag
Yes.
not all
That's
men.
yeah, that's important. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a
That's
common
so
phenomenon for sure.
yeah, that's so important. Yes, you're calling it a head start is exactly right. Right. We do have this massive hormonal cascade head start, but in the end, it is just a learning process. And learning takes effort, and learning takes time, and learning takes failing. Right. Like as a mom,
Mm.
how many times do you just flat out fail at something? And that's a learning moment, right? But the tolerance for that in other caregivers can be a little bit lower, right? Because the expectations on them tend socially, right, tend to be a little bit lower, sometimes a lot a bit lower. But yes, that's the, and so then it just kind of becomes a cycle, right? Where it's like you've tried the zillion things. So you have a higher capacity, right? A higher like frustration tolerance basically for managing when it doesn't go well and like just kind of getting back in there and trying something different, and you have all of this already learned knowledge. Whereas, a dad might get more easily frustrated because they haven't had all of that exposure to failure and they haven't had as many hits of oxytocin, right? So it really is just
Or maybe they're getting their hits of oxytocin elsewhere,
mhm.
like at
Yeah.
work or whatever. So
Oh,
it's like
absolutely.
you're going to chase after the thing that gives you the oxytocin. I would
Yes.
imagine. But that's so if you had a magic wand, you're like, king of the universe, what is it that you think society could do to actually like sort of support the evolutionary process of all this like childbirth and the brain development? Like what could society do better to really support this whole process? If you had total control, would you be like, all dads need to stay home for a year and like, or what is it that you think could like maybe help it so that women aren't receiving such an overload in their brain or, can get through the like traumatic process of childbirth? What is it that maybe we're lacking in society to help support women?
Oh, I mean, in the US, we're lacking almost everything to support women and mothers. That's like, right, like from a society level, like overarching federal like policies. First of all, we need paid leave, right? On average, most women go back to work 2 weeks after giving birth, which is uh, just an
Insane.
absolute abomination, right? So, paid leave, right? We can look to many other countries who are doing that very well. Sweden gives 480 days of paid leave to, I believe, each parent for each child. And so there are plenty, the US is the only industrialized country that doesn't offer paid leave as a federal policy. I think only 13 states in the US right now have paid leave policies. So that would be a big help, right? Letting parents
Hmm.
actually stay home and recover and adjust to becoming parents. And even things like in France, like pelvic floor physical therapy is part of just routine postpartum care. Whereas here, most of the time you have to pay out of pocket for it and it's hundreds of dollars per appointment. But if you think about what happens to your body it makes sense that you would need some expert help and support and coaching and exercises to help it sort of go back into place, right? All of your organs
Mhm.
literally rearranged. So like all some of your muscles tore apart, like your ligaments stretched, like it takes time and help putting your body back together. But even on an individual level, you can do things to sort of try to build your own village, right? Like that's one more task on your plate, right? Which is
Mhm.
unfair, but using whatever resources you have to make sure that you have the support that you need. I'm a big fan of postpartum doulas. Like if you're pregnant right now and you at all have the resources, a postpartum doula is so helpful because they're a person that's going to actually help you get food and sleep on top of sort of like
True.
coaching you through what's actually happening in this transition to motherhood. Um, Even things like using Meal Train, which is just a free website where you can have people sign up to drop off meals for you postpartum so that you are eating and you don't have to think about like cooking and cleaning and things like that. So yeah, just really trying to build your own personal village to give you the as much support as you possibly can. And then yeah, there are so many wonderful advocacy groups like Chamber of Mothers and Moms First who are working for federal paid leave policies, affordable childcare, all of those things that moms are basically just kind of like left out on their own to figure out. We need to start like recreating that village because that's how we evolved, right? We evolved parenting collectively and in communities and learning from other mothers who were more experienced than us, having someone who could take the baby and take care of them so that we could rest and recover. All of that used to be built in, and it's not anymore. We're just basically isolated and trying to figure it out ourselves, and it's the opposite of how we evolved.
I wanted to give you the opportunity too, because I know that you offer mentorship and you've also built a really cool audio course for navigating new motherhood. And I just wanted to give you the opportunity to share some info about it because I think that it could be really like helpful to our listeners.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I did compile all of this information because it's a lot into an audio course. It's about 90 minutes long and it's just packed full of the science, the sociology, the history, everything that goes into really what makes being a mom in the US so hard. And it's just a beautiful, it's basically like an hour and a half long ebook or like a podcast. And I wanted to make it an audio course because, we've all been nap trapped, I'm sure, right? Just sitting in a dark room holding a sleeping baby and feeling really lonely and confused and
Mm.
maybe sad or scared. And so, it's such a great thing, just like pop in your earbuds and just listen to all of this information. And it's so ridiculous that what we go through and nobody even teaches us what has happened to our bodies. Nobody explains why this is so difficult. So I wanted to be able to offer that accessibly to new moms. So yeah, it has a bunch of different modules. We talk about body, we talk about brain, we talk about the village and human evolution. We talk about self-care, identifying your needs, all of those things. So it's really great. And then yeah, I also am certified in birth story medicine, which is
Mm.
just a beautiful facilitated process of processing your birth story, like telling it in a way that maybe you haven't told it to anyone else before, and digging into the parts that still hurt, and shifting your relationship with your experience of in childbirth. And yeah, I also offer just one-on-one mentorship because in the absence of the village, right, where we are supposed to have other more experienced moms to bounce things off of and to learn from and to just kind of figure out our own way. I want to be that person if you need it, right? So
Yeah.
talking through whatever is coming up for you, right? Whether it's like a difficult relationship with your mother-in-law or trying to decide if you're going to continue pumping or just colic, like anything that you're struggling with that you need help with or even just to vent about, right? It's a safe space to do that and to get resources and support.
That's so excellent. Oh, I'm so glad we had you on today because it's just wonderful when you find someone who just has like all that nuggets of wisdom on nuggets on wisdom because it just makes you feel so much more validated. And it's like motherhood's tough enough. So, man, when you find a gem like you, makes it that much easier. So, I'm super pumped. And I hope that everybody, who's listening goes and checks you out because, girl, I bet you're fierceunfolding.com and just that $49 audio course is banging. So thanks so much for coming on the show today, and we will chat soon.
Yeah, thanks so
Thank you
much.
so much.
And just a reminder, you guys can find her on Instagram at Fierce Unfolding, and her website is thefierceunfolding.com. And we'll be posting links to pretty much everything she referenced in the description so that it's easy for you to find, including the course and mentorship information. So thanks so much again, Kelly, for having you. We love chatting with you, and we hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
Yay! Thank you for tuning in to the Raising Mama podcast. Your presence means a lot, and we hope you found our discussion insightful.
To become a part of our community, follow us on Instagram at Raising Mama Podcast. Explore resources on the Raising Mama Village located at www.raisingmama.com.
You're never alone on this motherhood journey. We're here to support you every step of the way.